It's always raining in Akron in a particularly dreary way. I stare at the drops sliding down the window pane of my office, and I think I should be used to the grayness by now. 32 years in the same city, and still every fall I'm surprised at how dank it can get here. Margot, do you have the Rivers insurance application ready? Doris, my boss, snapped me out of my reverie. Yes, I sent it in this morning, I answered, turning to the computer. And I've prepared a preliminary estimate for the Hendersons. Doris nods with what I call a minimally satisfactory expression on her face. No praise, no criticism, just confirmation that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm 32 years old, and I'm an insurance specialist at Akron Guarantee. It's not the most exciting job, but it gives me stability and a chance to help parents who never appreciated it. Phone vibrates. A message from my mom. We got the electric bill. $123. Can you pay it this week? I sigh. No. Hey, how's it going? Or thanks for your past help. Just another bill they expect me to pay. I send a short, okay, knowing that another similar request will come in a day or two. Sometimes I wonder if they even remember that I have my own life, my own bills, my own problems. But then I remind myself that for them, I was always in the background. Quentin Birch, the son of Aunt Elizabeth, my father's sister, was the centerpiece of their lives. I remember the day Quentin showed up at our house. I was 7, he was 6. Aunt Elizabeth and her husband had been killed in a car accident, and my parents didn't hesitate to take my nephew in. A noble act, if it weren't for one but, with Quentin's arrival, it was as if I had become invisible. Quentin is so talented, my mom said, when he drew another doodle. Quentin is going to play the violin. He has a perfect ear, my father said as he bought the instrument I dreamed of. Quentin will go to the best university. He has an incredible aptitude for math, they repeated when I showed them my A's in algebra. My whole life became a relentless effort to prove that I was worthy of their attention, too. I brought excellent grades, participated in school Olympiads, entered the local college on a budget. But no matter what I did, their eyes always lit up at the mention of Quentin. I opened the banking app and transferred the money to my parents' account. $123 plus $200 for just in case. As usual, no confirmation or thank you follows. It's become as routine as brushing my teeth or paying my rent. After work, I stop by the supermarket and buy groceries for my parents. It's not part of their regular requests, but I know my mom will be glad not to have to go to the store in this weather. Maybe this gesture will bring out some warm feelings in her toward me. My parents' house greets me with the familiar creak of the gate. I still remember my father promising to fix it when I was a teenager. But then it was time to pay for Quentin's fencing lessons, and the wicket was forgotten. Is that you, Margot? Mom called out to me from the living room, not even coming up to greet me. Yes, I brought you groceries, I answer, taking off my shoes in the hallway. Mom is sitting in her favorite chair, watching TV. On the wall across the hall are pictures of Quentin. Quentin at graduation. Quentin is getting his diploma. Quentin in Europe, where he went with my parents' money right after college while I worked 2 jobs to help them with the mortgage. How nice, Mom says, taking a quick glance at the packages. Put everything in the kitchen. By the way, did you wire the money for the electric bill? Yes, and 200 extra, I say, walking into the kitchen. Good, she goes back to the TV. Quentin called yesterday. He's doing great. He got a promotion at that firm. Your father is so proud. I silently arrange the groceries in the fridge, trying not to think about the fact that my promotions have never been so enthusiastic. My last success, getting my senior license, they didn't even remember. Where's Dad? I ask, closing the refrigerator. In the garage, sorting through old stuff, going to send Quentin some of his tools. You know how Quentin likes carpentry. I do. Quentin made a birdhouse once, and my parents still talk about it like it's the 8th wonder of the world. And the bird feeder I made when I was that age was thrown out the first time they cleaned up. I go to the garage where my father is really going through his tools. There are boxes of old documents in the corner. My parents finally decided to dismantle the mezzanine. Hey, Dad. Ah, Margot. He gives me a quick glance. It's good to have you here. Can you help me sort through these papers? I need to sort through what to throw away and what to keep. I nod and sit down in front of the boxes. old receipts, letters, insurance policies. My father keeps muttering something about Quentin, but I've learned to let it pass. In one of the folders, I find my high school diplomas. I wonder if my parents even knew they had them. Next to it are Quentin's childhood drawings, carefully arranged in a separate envelope labeled Our Boy's Art. Time passes. My father goes into the house, leaving me alone with the papers. I methodically sort through the papers until I come across a thick envelope from the law firm of Patterson and Sons. Pulling out the contents, my heart skips a beat. Last will and testament of Harold and Miriam Winsley. I know I shouldn't read it. It's private. But something inside me, perhaps that little girl still waiting for parental approval, makes me unfold the document. The first lines are standard, legal language. But then I see this. All of our property, including the house at 23 Maple Street, Akron, Ohio, as well as all financial assets and personal effects, we bequeath to our nephew Quentin Birch, whom we have always considered our true son. I reread that line over and over again, not believing my eyes. A true son. Who am I then? The ATM machine? An attendant? Years of financial support, years of trying to earn their love, and all the while they planned to leave everything to him, without even mentioning me in their will. It was as if I never existed. With trembling hands, I return the document to the envelope and place it in exactly the same spot. Only one thought pulses in my head. Enough. Stop trying. Enough hoping. Enough giving. I walk out of the garage and say goodbye to my parents, mechanically promising to stop by next week. They don't even notice that anything is wrong. They've never noticed. On the way home, I make a decision I should have made years ago. No more money, no more groceries, no more trying to buy their love they never had for me. Let their real son take care of them now. All the way home, I couldn't escape the feeling of being kicked in the butt. The words of my parents' will flashed over and over in my mind. To our nephew Quentin Birch, whom they have always considered their true son. So to them, I'd always been fake? Just a biological daughter, but not a soulmate? I parked my car outside my apartment building on the outskirts of Akron. It's nothing fancy, a typical 5-story red brick building, but it's my house, which I'm paying for myself. Unlike my parents, which took a quarter of my paycheck. The apartment was dark and chilly. I didn't turn on the light, just tossed my keys on the nightstand and sank down on the couch. The phone in my pocket was heavy in my hand, as if reminding me that my mom would probably text me soon with another request. I pulled out my notebook, an old-fashioned habit of jotting down thoughts on paper I'd had since high school. The pen froze over a blank sheet of paper. What to write? My parents think I'm a nobody? 32 years of pretending? In the end, I just wrote numbers. In the last year, parents' mortgage, $3,600 utility bills, about $2,000 groceries, about $1,200. Car insurance, $650 meds for mom, $800, almost $8,000 for the year. $8,000 I could spend on myself, on my life. Maybe on a refresher course or a trip I'd long dreamed of taking, or just put it aside for a better place of my own. And all these years later, I thought I was making an investment. Not in the financial sense, of course. I hoped that my support would do something to earn their love. That one day they'd look at me and say, "Margot, we're so proud of you." But instead, they secretly made a will that didn't even mention me. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I lay staring at the ceiling and replayed every episode of my childhood and adolescence in my head. Every time my parents missed my school plays because Quentin had a soccer game. Every birthday when my gift was clearly cheaper and less thoughtful than his. Every next time Margot when I asked for attention. The next morning I went to work, mechanically performing my duties. Doris noticed my condition and asked if I was all right. "Yeah, I just didn't sleep well," I lied, not ready to discuss my family problems. "Well, cheer up. We have a new client, we need to make a good impression," she said, and left my office. Toward the end of the day, a text from my mom arrived. "Don't forget to pay your dad's insurance on Monday. No please or thank you. Just a reminder of another financial obligation." I didn't respond. For the first time in a long time, I just ignored her message. It was a strange feeling, a mixture of guilt and some kind of painful satisfaction. The next day, Saturday, I usually stop by my parents' house with groceries, but instead, I stayed home and did a major cleaning. Threw out old stuff, washed the windows, even alphabetized the books. Anything to avoid thinking about what I was about to do, or more accurately, not do. The phone rang towards evening. Mom. I let it ring all the way through without answering it. 10 minutes later, the message came. We're waiting for you with groceries. Where are you? I wrote a short, can't make it today, business, and muted the phone. The next week passed like a blur. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner, watched TV shows, the usual life of an ordinary person, only now without the daily burden of parental expectations and demands. On Monday, I didn't pay my father's insurance. Tuesday, I ignored a reminder about the water bill. On Wednesday, rejected a call from my mom. On Thursday, I deleted a voicemail message without listening. The strange thing is, I felt better every day. It was as if I'd dropped the heavy backpack I'd been carrying for so long, I'd stopped noticing its weight. Only now, without it, did I realize how heavy it was. On Friday, I met Phoebe's coworker at the bar after work for the first time in months. You look different, she said, sipping a cocktail. More relaxed. Really? I smiled, realizing she was right. I was just starting to realize something about my life. Like what? That sometimes you have to stop trying to earn the love of those who can't give it, I said, surprised at my own honesty. Phoebe nodded thoughtfully. That's about your parents, isn't it? You're always taking care of them and they never noticed, I finished for her. And, I got tired of trying. That night was the first time I ever told anyone the truth about my family. About Quentin, about the years in the shadows, about the will. Phoebe listened without interrupting, and her support meant more to me than I could express. You should have done this a long time ago, Margot, she said when I was done. Stop this one-sidedness. I guess, I shrugged, but I still felt guilty. It'll pass, she squeezed my hand reassuringly. When you realize it's not your fault that they can't love you the way you deserve. The days went by. The parental texts and calls became more and more insistent. Margot, the electric bill needs to be paid. Margot, call right away. Margot, what's going on? I read them and didn't answer, each time feeling a strange mix of pain and release. 2 weeks after my discovery, my mom sent that very message. Short, dry, no foreplay. Pass the money on the mortgage. Not Margot, we're worried. Not daughter, what's wrong? Not even please. Just a demand, like I was an ATM that had just broken down and needed a reboot. I stared at those words for a long, long time. They contained our entire conversation, our entire family. They were never interested in me as a person, only in what I could do for them. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What to answer? A long explanation about how much they'd hurt me? A sarcastic reminder that they had a real son who could take care of them? Or just remain silent as I'd been doing for the past few weeks? But silence no longer felt right. I had to say something, make a point, close this chapter of my life once and for all. I wrote a single word, no, and pressed send. Then I opened my phone settings and blocked both my mom's and dad's numbers. No more demands, no more trying to buy their love. It was strange to realize that I was no longer a daughter. I mean, biologically, of course, everything was still the same. But emotionally, psychologically, I was free of that role. From having to live up to their expectations, from having to constantly prove that I was worthy of their attention. I took a deep breath, feeling my shoulders straighten. It was raining outside the window, the same Akron rain that always seemed so dreary to me. But now there was something cleansing in its monotonous noise, like it was washing away all those years of trying to be someone I wasn't, when I gave everything and got nothing in return. A true son, they wrote. Well, now they'll have a chance to see if their real son can take care of them the way I did, and I will learn to live for myself. For the first time in 32 years. Of course, I realized this wasn't the end. Sooner or later, they would find a way to contact me. Perhaps they'd come to the office or have a relative call. But in that moment, looking at the locked contacts on my phone, I felt a strange calmness. It was as if I had finally dropped the anchor that had held me in place all these years. I was ready to sail on, alone. The first call came the day after my parents blocked me. Aunt Dorothy was my mom's sister, someone I'd only talked to once a year at family gatherings. Her name on the phone screen made me laugh nervously. My parents didn't waste any time tapping into their kin's troops. I dropped the call. A moment later, a message came through. Margot, we need to talk. Your parents are very concerned. Worried? About what? That their home ATM was out of service? I deleted the message without responding. After Aunt Dorothy, there was Uncle Patrick, then Cousin Ellie, even elderly Grandma Edna, who barely knew how to use the phone. To each of them I answered with a polite but firm, "That's between me and my parents. Thank you for your concern." Work became my refuge. I immersed myself in insurance policies and premium calculations with such fervor that Doris even joked about whether I planned to take her place. I spent my evenings at home, allowing myself simple pleasures for the first time in years, cooking elaborate meals, watching movies I'd heard about, even signing up for yoga. All the things I hadn't had time or energy for before because of the constant traveling to my parents' house. But a week later, Quentin called. His number popped up on the screen Sunday morning as I sipped coffee on the tiny balcony of my apartment. I stared at the name and everything squeezed inside. Quentin. A man I'd known all my life and yet completely unaware of at the same time. A real son. My finger hovered over the reset button, but at the last moment I accepted the call. Hello? My voice sounded flat, almost indifferent. Margot? Quentin's voice was excited. Finally! I've been trying to reach you for days. I was silent, waiting for the continuation. What's going on? He asked. Harold and Miriam are in a panic. They say you've stopped communicating with them and aren't helping with the bills. Harold and Miriam. He always called them by their first names, not auntie and uncle. Another little detail that now seemed significant. It is, I answered dryly. But why? Did something happen? I took a deep breath. What to say? How to explain 32 years in the shadows? How to squeeze all the pain of reading the will into a phone conversation? It's a long conversation, Quentin, not for the phone. A pause on the other end. Okay, he finally said. Let's meet up. I'm in Akron until Wednesday. I knew I should say no, that talking to Quentin would only reopen old wounds. But part of me wanted to say what I'd been saying all these years. I wanted someone in my family to understand what I'd been through. Tomorrow, at the Starbucks on Market Street. 5 p.m., I said, and hung up without waiting for an answer. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. What would I say to him? Your foster parents loved you more than their own daughter? You took my family away from me? Or the truth? It's not your fault, but I can't look at you without remembering everything I've been through. By morning, I was exhausted but determined. I'm going to go to that meeting. I'm going to tell him the truth. And then maybe I could finally, truly move on. At the office, the day dragged on endlessly. I made mistakes in calculations, forgot to call clients back, spilled coffee on documents twice. By 3 o'clock, Doris sent me home, saying I was more of a nuisance than a help. And take care of your own problems, Margot, she added with unexpected warmth. You're too good a professional to work in this condition. At 4:30, I was already sitting in Starbucks, nervously stirring the latte I wasn't going to drink. The cafe was nearly empty a weekday, not the busiest time. Every time the door opened, I flinched. Quentin showed up at 5 sharp, always punctual, always impeccable. In high school, I'd hated that quality of his. Now it just seemed like part of his personality, neither good nor bad. He ordered a coffee and sat down across from me. He had a look of genuine concern on his face. You've lost weight, he said instead of greeting me. And you're still as observant as ever, I replied, trying not to sound sarcastic. Quentin sighed and put both hands around his cup, as if seeking warmth. Margot, what's going on? Harold and Miriam are at a loss. They say you've suddenly stopped communicating, not answering your cell phone, not helping them financially. That's not like you. I looked at him, at his genuinely concerned face, and suddenly felt tired. Not anger, not resentment, just an endless weariness of it all. I found their will, I said quietly. Quentin frowned. The will? What will? Their last will. I looked straight into his eyes. Where they leave you everything. The house, the savings, everything. and they call you their true son." His face changed. First bewilderment, then shock, then something like, shame? "Yep, I didn't know anything about it." He shook his head. "Margot, I swear I had no idea. I believed him. Quentin had always been a terrible liar. As a kid, it was one of the few qualities he had that comforted me. At least I was better than him at something." "I believe that," I said. "But that doesn't change the fact that they believe that they've always felt that way." "It's some kind of misunderstanding." Quentin pushed the cup away. "There must be another explanation. They love you, Margot. You're their daughter." I grinned bitterly. "Have you ever wondered why in all the family photos you're in the center and I'm on the side? Why for your graduation they spent $1,000 on a party and for mine they just gave you a card? Why did they pay for your college tuition and I had to take out a loan?" I took a breath. And why had I been paying their bills for the last 7 years and they hadn't even said thank you? Quentin looked stunned. "Yeah, I hadn't noticed," he mumbled. "Of course you hadn't." I shook my head. "You didn't have to notice. You were the favorite, the center of their universe." He was silent for a long time, staring into his cup. When he finally looked up, there was something new in his eyes. Understanding. "I'm sorry, Margot," he said quietly. "I really didn't realize it was like this. To me, they had always just been Harold and Miriam, the people who raised me after my parents died. I was grateful to them, but—" He hesitated. "I never wanted to take your place." "I know," I replied, and it was the truth. "You were just a kid. So was I. We were both pawns in their strange game. You the golden child, me the backup." Quentin looked shocked. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I shrugged my shoulders. "Live my life. Without them. Without constantly fighting for crumbs of their attention. Without the financial support of people who don't even see fit to mention me in their wills." "But they're your parents." "Biologically, yes," I nodded. "But emotionally, they made their choice a long time ago." We sat in silence for a few minutes. It was starting to rain outside the window, a light drizzle, typical of Akron this time of year. "You know," Quentin said suddenly, "I've always envied you." I looked at him in surprise. "Me?" He nodded. "You had real parents. Yours. Not adopted, not out of pity. I knew that no matter how hard Harold and Miriam tried, I would always be a substitute for them, the son of a dead sister. And you were real. I never really thought about it, how Quentin might have felt about our situation, that he might have had his own traumas and insecurities too. I think we were both wrong in our assumptions," I said quietly. "I guess so," he smiled weakly. "What should I tell them? Harold and Miriam?" I sighed. "The truth. That I knew about the will, that I would no longer be their financial backbone, and that they would have to learn to live with their choices." Quentin nodded. Then, hesitating, he added, "I don't want their inheritance, Margot. I never have." "It's none of my business," I replied. "And frankly, I don't care what happens to the house or their savings anymore. I just want to move on." As we said goodbye outside the cafe, the rain intensified. Quentin offered me a ride, but I declined. I wanted to walk, to think, reflect on everything that had happened. "I'm sorry about what happened, Margot," he said before he left. "I really am." I watched him get into his car and drive away, and for the first time in years, I felt neither envy nor resentment toward him. Just some strange connection to people who had experienced the same family drama from different angles. On the way home, I thought about our conversation, about how strange life can be sometimes. Quentin and I grew up in the same house, but it was like we were in parallel universes. I always thought he took my parents away from me, and he thought I had something he would never have, the right to be a real child in the family. The rain was getting heavier, but I didn't quicken my step. The water ran down my face, mixing with the tears I hadn't even noticed I was shedding. I wasn't crying tears of grief or resentment. They were tears of release. It was as if all those years of rejection and fighting for parental love were finally coming out of me, washed away by the Akron rain. Quentin was right about one thing. We both deserved better. Better parents, better childhoods, better understanding. But we got what we got. And now I had to decide what to do with that baggage next. I knew my parents wouldn't stop trying to contact me. They could come to work, they could show up at my house, they could involve more relatives. But for the first time in years, it didn't scare me. I was no longer the Margot who did everything to earn their approval. I was the new Margot, the one who had finally decided to live for herself. When I got home, the first thing I did was to take off my soaked clothes and take a hot shower. Then, wrapped in a robe, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and felt something like peace for the first time in a long time. Not happiness. No, it was too early to talk about happiness. But definitely a step in the right direction. The phone on the table vibrated. A message from Quentin. Talk to them. They're shocked. Said it was a misunderstanding, that of course they love you. But they didn't deny the will. I think you should prepare yourself. They'll be trying to contact you. I didn't reply. I just put the phone away and continued to stare at the rain outside the window. In the back of my mind, I knew that my parents would indeed show up, and that I would have to face them, maybe for the first time for real. But that would be tomorrow. And today, for the first time in years, I allowed myself to just be. No obligations, no guilt, no constant feeling that I wasn't good enough. Just Margot Winsley, 32 years old, from Akron, Ohio, on her own. After meeting Quentin, I expected my parents to contact me. A phone call, a letter, maybe a message through relatives. But they chose a different route. It happened on Saturday, 3 days after our conversation at the cafe. I planned a quiet day at home, general cleaning, manicure, maybe an evening with a book or a TV series. Life was slowly falling into a new direction, calmer and more measured, without the constant stress of parental demands. The doorbell rang around noon. I wasn't expecting visitors, so I approached the door cautiously and looked through the peephole. My parents were standing on the landing. Mom, straight as a string with a frozen expression on her face that I knew from childhood. We're very disappointed in you, Margot. Dad, a little behind her, clearly unsure but determined. My heart skipped a beat. Part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home, just not open the door. But I knew that would only delay the inevitable. Besides, the neighbors might have already told them I was home. Old Mrs. Fleming from the first floor always knew who was coming and going. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. Margot, Mom began without greeting. We need to talk. You could have called before you came over, I said, making no attempt to invite them inside. You're blocking our numbers, Dad objected. How could we call? I reluctantly backed away from the door, allowing them to enter. They made their way into my small living room, looking around with an expression I couldn't quite pinpoint. Surprise? Disappointment? Maybe they were expecting to see signs that without their presence in my life, I had hit rock bottom? Sit down. I pointed to the couch and took the chair across from them, creating distance. They sat down. Mom put her purse on her lap as if she didn't plan to stay long. Dad looked uncomfortable, constantly looking around. Quentin told us that you two had met, Mom began, and that you told him something ridiculous about the will. I felt a wave of irritation rising inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. It's not ridiculous, Mom. I saw your will when I was helping you sort through the paperwork in the garage. To our nephew Quentin Birch, whom we have always considered our true son. Those are your words, aren't they? Dad glanced over to Mom, and in that brief glance I saw confirmation. They weren't going to deny it. It's just wording for legal purposes, Dad said, not looking me in the eye. You don't have to take it so literally. Literally? I almost laughed. How else am I supposed to take the fact that you didn't mention me in the will? That everything, every cent, everything should go to Quentin? You have nothing to worry about. Mom pressed her lips together. You have a job, an apartment, and Quentin. Quentin is a successful financial advisor in Chicago, I interrupted. He makes 3 times as much as I do. And by the way, he's not thrilled about your decision either. It was true. Quentin had sent me another message after our conversation at the cafe, saying that he had tried to talk my parents out of their plan, but they were adamant. It's not about the money, Margot, Mom said in that condescending tone I'd hated since I was a kid. It's that you suddenly stopped helping us without any warning. That's no way to treat a parent. That's it. The real reason they're here. Not concern for my emotional well-being, not to settle a misunderstanding. It's the money. I've been helping you for 7 years, I said quietly, trying to keep my emotions in check. Paying the mortgage, paying the bills, buying groceries, and not once, I've never once heard a sincere thank you. We're your parents, my father frowned. Do you have to say thank you for what you're supposed to? It is. The word hit me like a slap in the face. Everything I'd done, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the overtime hours I'd worked so I could have money for myself and for them, it was all just entitled. No, Dad, it's not. I shook my head. I'm a grown man. I have my own life, my own expenses. Helping you was my choice. A choice I made because I thought you appreciated it, that you appreciated me. Mom snorted. It's always the drama, Margot. That's why we always relied on Quentin more. He never threw tantrums over nothing. I couldn't believe my ears. Even now, even after everything, she kept comparing me to him, belittling my feelings. It's not a tantrum, Mom. I tried to keep my voice even. It's the reaction of someone who's given for years and gotten nothing in return. No love, no recognition, not even simple respect. We've always loved you, my father argued. But his voice sounded unconvincing, even to him. Did you? I looked him straight in the eye. Then why was it that Quentin's accomplishments were always the first to come first at all the family celebrations? Why were my successes always overshadowed? Why is it that even now, when I tell you how I feel, you don't listen? There was a heavy silence. A car drove by outside the window, playing loud music. Somewhere upstairs, a neighbor was moving furniture. The usual sounds of a Saturday afternoon, which now seemed especially harsh against the background of our tense conversation. We didn't come here to fight, Mom finally said, opening her purse. We came to resolve the mortgage payment. We're already in arrears, and the bank is assessing penalties. She pulled out a piece of paper, a bank statement, and put it on the coffee table between us. $480 for this month, plus $35 in late fees. I stared at the paper, not believing what was happening. After everything we talked about, all they care about is money? Is that really all they came here for? You haven't heard a word I've said, I said, feeling my eyes fill with tears but refusing to let them fall. You really don't understand why I stopped helping you? We understand that you're upset about some legal technicality in a document you shouldn't even have seen, Dad said. But that's no reason to stop helping your parents. No reason? I shook my head. And the fact that you've favored Quentin my whole life is a no excuse too? The fact that you've never appreciated me, my accomplishments, my support also? Mom sighed with that expression of infinite patience she always used when she thought I was being unreasonable. Margot, we're not going to go over all the childhood grievances right now. We're here to talk about a specific problem. When are you going to wire the money for the mortgage? And that's when something in me finally broke. Or maybe it was the other way around. I realized I'd never get what I'd wanted for so long. I'd never hear them recognize my worth. To them, I would always be a source of financial support, nothing more. Never, I said. And for the first time in the entire conversation, my voice sounded absolutely firm. I will never pay your bills again. Never again. Mom straightened up as if I'd hit her. What do you mean? Exactly what I said. I won't help you anymore. Not with the mortgage, not with the utilities, not with groceries. Nothing. But how are we going to manage? Dad exclaimed. We were counting on your help. You can sell the house and buy something smaller that you can afford, I said calmly. You can ask Quentin for help. He's your real son. You can get a part-time job. You have options. You can't do this to us. My mother looked at me in amazement, as if I were speaking a foreign language. We're your parents. Parents who have spent my whole life letting me know I was second class. I stood up. Parents who didn't even see fit to mention me in their will. Parents who only came to my house for the money, not because they cared about me. I went to the door and opened it. I don't think we have anything more to discuss. Please leave. They looked at me with disbelief. Apparently, they hadn't expected such a turn. Mom was the first to come to her senses and stood up, clutching her purse so tightly that her knuckles turned white. You're going to regret this, Margot, she said, walking past me toward the door. Someday you'll need help too, and then I'll turn to my friends, I finished for her. People who appreciate me for who I am. My father followed my mother, but stopped at the door. For a moment, I thought something flashed in his eyes, maybe regret, understanding. But he just shook his head and walked out without a word. I closed the door and leaned back against it, feeling my knees shake. My chest felt heavy like I'd run a marathon, but at the same time there was a strange relief, like I'd finally dropped a huge rock I'd been dragging around my whole life. They wouldn't change. The thought was painful but liberating. All these years I'd hoped that if I was good enough, successful enough, generous enough, that one day they would see my worth. But now I realized it wasn't about me. It never was. It was about them, about their inability to love me the way I deserved. I walked to the bathroom and washed my face with cold water, looking at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red, but there were no tears in them, just determination. I would no longer waste my life trying to earn their love. It was time to live for myself. That night, I opened my laptop and started looking for apartments in another Akron neighborhood, away from my parents, away from all the memories. A new place, a new beginning. I deserved it. The phone rang. Phoebe, my coworker with whom we'd recently begun to connect more closely. Hey, how about a movie tonight? She asked. They released that thriller we were talking about. You know, I replied, feeling my lips stretch into a smile. That's exactly what I need right now. Is something wrong? Her voice became concerned. You seem strange. A lot of things, I said. I'll tell you over popcorn. After I finished talking to Phoebe, I went back to looking for apartments. The Highland Square neighborhood looked promising, not far from work, good infrastructure, and most importantly, a completely different part of town from my parents' house. One apartment in particular caught my eye, small, on the third floor, with a balcony and a view of the park. A little more expensive than my current one, but now that I wouldn't have to pay my parents' bills, I could afford it. I sent a request for a viewing, scheduling it for tomorrow. The sooner the better. I wanted a fresh start, and a new apartment seemed like the right first step. The conversation with my parents kept running through my head, but now without the same pain. More like a reminder that I had made the right choice. They had shown their true attitude towards me, and although it hurt, it was better to know the truth and move on than to continue living under illusions. I started making a list of things I would need to pack for the move, and I caught myself thinking that for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about the upcoming change. Not fear, not anxiety, just excitement, anticipation of something new and better. Akron is a small town, and my parents and I will probably cross paths again. Maybe at the supermarket or on the street. Perhaps they would try to contact me again through relatives or acquaintances. But it didn't matter now. I would no longer let them dictate my life or determine my worth. I am Margot Winsley, and I deserve better. It was like a mantra I repeated to myself as I picked out furniture for my new apartment, planning how I would arrange things, what colors would be in the interior, my space, my rules, my life. When I went to bed that night, there was a surprising clarity in my head. Tomorrow, I'll start a new chapter, without a parent's shadow over my head, without the constant feeling that I'm not good enough. Just me, on my own terms. And for the first time in years, I fell asleep without a heaviness in my chest, without the underlying worry that I had to call someone, pay for something, help with something. I was free. Akron in spring falsely feigns hospitality. The lilacs and apple trees in the park across from my new house bloom with some perverse insistence, as if trying to convince me that life is beautiful. I look at them from my third-floor window and think that no amount of blooming trees will drown out the rot that has forever settled inside me after 32 years of parental rejection. 8 months have passed since the day I put my parents in their place. 8 months in which I had methodically cut them out of my life like a cancerous tumor is cut out. Completely, from the root, leaving no chance of recurrence. The new apartment in Highland Square is more expensive than the last one, but now that I'm not funding other people's lives, I can afford this small luxury, especially after the promotion that literally fell on my head 3 months ago. The life insurance department needs a manager, and I don't have any other candidates, Doris tossed to me in February, without taking her eyes off the monitor. Can you do it? It wasn't a question. Doris knew I would. Like everyone else around her, she was used to Margot Winsley never refusing extra responsibility. That Margot Winsley always tries to prove her worth, even if it costs her nerves, her health, and her personal life. I agreed. Of course I agreed. I may have cut ties with my parents, but their voices still echoed in my head. You're not good enough. Quentin would have done better. Don't let us down, Margot. I now had 3 employees under me, and I could see them tense up when I walked into the office. I've become the boss I've always feared, demanding to the point of cruelty, picky to the point of absurdity. I know that, and there's nothing I can do about it. I started seeing Elaine, the therapist, not of my own volition, but at the insistence of Doris, who once caught me sobbing in the bathroom. Either you get help, or I'm putting you on forced vacation, she said at the time. Your emotional state is affecting the entire department. Elaine is a woman in her 50s with a perpetually tired look and fine lines around her eyes. She listens to my stories about my childhood, about Quentin, about the will, and I see a flicker of pity in her eyes. I hate that pity more than I've ever hated parental neglect. Last Thursday, something happened that I'd rather forget. The session began as usual. Her office with dimmed lights, the soft chair I always feel uncomfortable in, the smell of lavender that Elaine thinks is supposed to be soothing, but is actually only annoying. How was your week, Margot? She asked, settling into her chair and pulling out a notebook. The usual, I answered. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Anything memorable? New contacts with relatives, maybe? I shook my head, but then I remembered. Mom tried to intercept me at the supermarket. I blew her off. Elaine tilted her head slightly, as she always does when something catches her professional attention. And how did you feel after that conversation? Liberated, I lied. In fact, after that meeting, I'd spent a sleepless night replaying the conversation with my mother over and over again, thinking up more scathing answers, imagining how I could say something that would really make her feel all the pain she'd caused me. Are you sure? Elaine looked at me with that expression I hated, a mixture of professional skepticism and condescending understanding. Yes, I crossed my arms over my chest. I'd told her everything I'd wanted to say for years. I'd made my point. Dots are rarely final in family relationships, she said, especially when parents are involved. In my case, it's final, I cut her off. I cut them out of my life, forever. Elaine made a note in her notebook. I hated those notes, that inaccessible shorthand in which she recorded my weaknesses, my vulnerabilities, my mistakes. Let's talk about your work, she suggested, changing the subject. How are your relationships with your subordinates? I shrugged my shoulders. Fine. They do their job, I do mine. But? She raised an eyebrow, clearly catching something in my tone. But sometimes I think they're afraid of me, I admitted reluctantly. That I'm too tough. Is that a problem for you? No, I answered too quickly. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be a tyrant, but I don't want to be weak either. There's a difference between strength and cruelty, Margot, Elaine said softly. Between demanding and humiliating. I know, I snapped back. I don't humiliate my employees. But sometimes I stammered, not wanting to admit it. Sometimes I hear my mother's tone in my voice. I see the same look of perpetual disappointment on my face that I saw in hers. And it scares me. Elaine nodded, as if I confirmed some theory of hers. It's called identifying with the aggressor, she said. When we unconsciously adopt the behavior of those who hurt us, it's a defense mechanism. I don't identify with her, I objected, feeling a wave of anger rising inside. I hate her, everything she's done, everything she is. I despise it. And yet, Elaine looked at me with that expression of patient understanding that always pissed me off. You admit that you sometimes behave as she does. I felt something inside me break. It was as if Elaine had found a sore spot and was pressing it mercilessly. I'm not like her, I said, and my voice shook with restrained rage. I'll never be like her. Margot, Elaine leaned forward. We all carry traces of those who raised us, the good and the bad. Recognizing that is the first step toward. To what? I interrupted. Forgiveness? To letting go of the past? Is that what you want? To forgive the people who'd spent 32 years methodically destroying my self esteem? Elaine straightened in her chair. Her face remained professionally neutral, but I could see her shoulders tense. I wasn't talking about forgiveness, Margot. I was talking about understanding the mechanisms that influence your current behavior. To what? I felt the anger turn to rage, dark and burning, so that I could become a better version of myself, kind, forgiving, healed, so that you can make a conscious choice, she answered calmly. Right now you are reacting, not acting. You're letting the past dictate your present. Are you suggesting I forget the past? My voice got louder. Pretend it never happened? That I wasn't rejected time after time, humiliated, devalued? No, Margot. Elaine shook her head. I'm suggesting that you admit that it did happen. Acknowledge the pain, the anger, the resentment, and then decide if you want those feelings to continue to run your life. They don't run my life, I snapped back. I run my own life. I cut ties with my parents. I got a promotion. I moved into a new apartment. I've moved on. But you still hear their voices in your head, Elaine objected softly. You still see their reflections in the mirror. You still let their criticism guide your decisions. I stood up so abruptly that I felt dizzy. The bag at my feet toppled over, scattering its contents on the floor: keys, wallet, lipstick, hairbrush. You don't know anything about me, I said, and my own voice sounded foreign cold, sharp as a blade. You sit in your cozy office with your diplomas on the walls, and you think you can understand what I've been through? You think your book theories and psychological terms can explain what it's like to be invisible in your own family? Elaine didn't move from her seat, only her hand gripped the pen tighter. I don't pretend to understand your personal experience, Margot, she said quietly. But I can see the pain that still lives in you, and I see how it affects your relationships with other people. What relationships? I laughed, and there was no mirth in that laugh. I don't have relationships. I don't let anyone into my life because I know they will all eventually betray me like my parents did. All of them will eventually choose someone else, someone real, instead of me. Elaine was silent, letting me speak. The silence was worse than any words. It emphasized the truth of my confession, its naked, painful essence. I bent down to pick up my scattered belongings, but my hands were shaking so badly that I couldn't even hold my keys. They clinked on the floor, and the sound brought me to my senses in a strange way. I'm not coming back, I said, finally managing to zipper up my bag. This is a waste of time. You can't help me because my problem isn't me. My problem is that my parents never loved me, and no amount of therapy is going to change that. It's your decision, Margot, Elaine replied. Her voice was still calm, but I could see the tension around her eyes. But I want you to know that the door is always open, when and if you decide to come back. I won't, I said, heading for the exit. Goodbye, Dr. Elaine. I walked out of the office without looking back, and only in the car did I let myself cry hot, angry tears that burned my cheeks. Not out of grief, not out of resentment. It was rage at the world, which refused to realize how deeply I'd been hurt. Anger at myself for letting Elaine see that wound. I haven't been back to her since. Doris asked how therapy was going, and I lied that it was going well. In fact, in the hours I used to go to Elaine's, I now sit in the cafe around the corner, pretending I have somewhere to go, someone who cares about me. My day starts at 5:30, not even with an alarm clock, but from a nightmare in which I read lines from my parents' will over and over again. To our nephew Quentin Birch, whom we have always considered our true son. I wake up in a cold sweat with my heart pounding and realize I won't be able to go back to sleep. Shower, coffee too strong, burning my throat, checking email, answering messages. I've been in the office since 7 in the morning, 2 hours earlier than everyone else, because I'm still proving my worth to the ghosts I've driven out of my life. The neighbors in the new house keep their distance. Maybe they sense that there's something wrong with me, like I'm giving off a toxic vibe that's worth staying away from. Across the street lives Talia, a young woman with blue hair who once invited me over for tea. I sat there for 20 minutes without saying a word and then ran away, making up a non existent work call. She never invited me back. The floor below was an elderly couple, Gordon and Esther. They tried to make friends by leaving homemade baked goods at my door. I threw them out without touching them. Not because I don't trust them, just because I've learned not to take anything for free. Everything in this life has to be paid for, one way or another. And in the apartment next door is Noah, the IT guy who's hardly ever home. A couple times he's asked me to feed his cat when he's away. I agreed, but every time I entered his apartment, I felt an overwhelming urge to break something, to leave a mark, to prove that I was here, that I existed. My parents tried to contact me dozens of times. They came to my office, waited in the parking lot, called colleagues. I went out the emergency exit, changed routes, blocked their numbers on the phones of anyone who could give it to them. One day, my mom intercepted me outside the Kroger supermarket on the corner of Market Street. It was a Tuesday, about 6 o'clock in the evening. I was walking out with bags of groceries, planning to quickly get to my car and drive home, when I noticed her, standing by my car like a sentry on guard duty. She looked aged, gaunt. Her hair, which she used to dye so carefully, now showed gray at the roots. Her clothes, always impeccably ironed, were wrinkled, as if she had slept in them. For a moment, something trembled inside, maybe a remnant of filial affection that years of neglect couldn't etch. But only for a moment. Margot. She said my name with that peculiar intonation I'd known since childhood, a mixture of reproach and disappointment, as if my very existence were a mistake she had to endure. I stopped a few steps away from her, clutching the grocery bags tighter. My face took on that expression of cold neutrality I'd honed over the years of living with them, not giving anything away, not giving them a clue to criticize. Miriam, I answered, using her name instead of Mom. It was a conscious choice, and I saw her flinch when she heard it. So now you're calling me by my first name? She asked with a bitter chuckle. Like Quentin? Quentin at least had a reason to call you by your first names, I replied evenly. You weren't his parents. What excuse do you have for never being mine? Her face contorted as if I'd slapped her. Good. Let her feel some of the pain she'd caused me over the years. We were always your parents, Margot, she said, taking a step toward me. We loved you. Don't you dare, I interrupted, and my voice sounded so cold I was surprised. Don't you dare say you loved me. Love doesn't look like that. Love doesn't put one child above another. Love doesn't ignore accomplishments. Love doesn't make you feel invisible in your own home. She shook her head and tears came to her eyes. Those tears used to work for me. I'd immediately feel guilty, start apologizing, try to make things right. But not now. You don't understand, she began. Quentin was an orphan. We had to deprive our own daughter of love and attention? I interrupted again. Should we have ignored my school concerts for his soccer games? Should have paid for his college by making me take out loans? Should I have given him everything in my will, calling him my real son? The last question hit exactly on target. Mom took a step back as if from a physical blow. You weren't supposed to see the will, was all she could say. I laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. Of course, that's what it's all about. Not the fact that you wrote such a thing. It's that I found out. You'd quietly continue to enjoy my financial support, knowing that Quentin would get everything in the end. You have nothing to worry about, she said in the tone she always used when she thought I was being unreasonable. You have a job, an apartment, and now you're free from toxic parents, I finished for her. Best gift I ever gave myself. My mom looked at me like she didn't recognize me. And she was right. She wasn't the Margot she knew. Not the obedient girl who was always trying to earn her approval. Not the ATM she used to turn to in times of need. Your father is ill, she said suddenly, changing tactics. He's got heart trouble. The doctor says, it's none of my business. I cut her off. You've made your choice, Miriam. You chose Quentin. Now you have to live with that choice. He left us too, she said with sudden anger. Your precious Quentin. Denied his inheritance, stopped calling, said we were horrible people. Did you turn him against us? I didn't know that. But the news that Quentin had indeed renounced the inheritance was strangely satisfying. So he wasn't lying in his letter. I didn't set him up, I answered calmly. I simply told him the truth, that you had always preferred him, that you'd left him everything in your will, that you called him your true son. The rest of the conclusions he drew on his own. She shook her head, and in her eyes I saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of facing the consequences of her actions. "What do we do now?" she asked quietly. "We're all alone, Margot. At our age." "You could start by confessing," I said, setting the bags on the ground and pulling out my car keys. "An admission that you were terrible parents, that you caused me pain that I will carry with me for the rest of my life, that you betrayed your own daughter for your adopted son and then lost them both. Start with the truth, Miriam." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite pinpoint. Shock, disbelief, perhaps even a glimmer of understanding. "Yeah, we we did the best we could," she finally said. "We were trying to be good parents." And in that moment, I realized that nothing would ever change. She would never admit her guilt. We'll never see the pain they caused. In their reality, they will always be the victims of ungrateful children, not the perpetrators of family tragedy. "Goodbye, Miriam," I said as I walked around her and opened the trunk of the car. "Don't look for me again. You don't have a daughter, remember? Just a real son who left you too." I put the groceries in the trunk, got in the car, and started the engine. Through the window, I saw her shouting something, waving her arms, but I couldn't make out the words. I didn't want to. For 32 years, I had listened to their criticism, their demands, their frustrations. Not one more second. I drove out of the parking lot without looking back. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing, small and lost, in the middle of an asphalt field. But she felt no pity or regret, only cold, crystal clear relief. I hadn't heard from Quentin either. After our meeting at the cafe, I thought that perhaps some new kind of bond had formed between us. A realization that we were both victims of parental manipulation. But then I realized I couldn't look at him without remembering every moment of humiliation, every comparison, not in my favor. This morning in the mailbox, I found an envelope with a Chicago postmark. Quentin's handwriting is neat, with a slight slant to the right. As perfect as he was, I wanted to throw it away without reading it. Crumple it up, tear it up, burn it. But something stopped me, the same morbid curiosity that had made me read my parents' will. At home, I opened the envelope with a stationery knife, carefully, as if there might be a bomb inside. "Dear Margot, I'm writing to you because I think you should know. 2 months ago, I formally renounced Harold and Miriam's inheritance. I made the renunciation legal to ensure that under no circumstances would I receive anything from their estate. Since our conversation, I've been thinking a lot about how things were run in the family, about how they exalted me while ignoring you. I always knew they were treating me differently, but never thought about the price you pay for it. Now I understand, and that understanding is tearing me apart. I've tried to talk to them, explain how unfair they've been to you. But they live in their own reality, where you're just an ungrateful daughter, and I'm the perfect son who suddenly rebelled. No argument can pierce that armor of self-deception. I ended up severing my relationship with them. It was hard. After all, they raised me, educated me, supported me in everything. But I can no longer be part of this twisted system where one child is exalted at the expense of another. I don't expect you and I to ever be close. There's too much pain between us. I just wanted you to know that you were always right. And I admire your courage to break the cycle. If you ever want to get in touch, you know where to find me. Sincerely yours, Quentin. I read the letter 3 times. Each time a wave of different emotions rose up inside. Anger. How dare he play noble? Satisfaction. So I was right after all. Bitterness. Why hadn't he seen it all before, when he could have done something about it? But most of all, there was a strange sense of emptiness. It was as if the last thread linking me to the past had been severed. Now my parents were all alone, without the daughter they'd never appreciated and the adopted son they'd idolized. Is there any justice in that? Perhaps. But it doesn't bring the satisfaction I expected. Revenge turned out to be a dish not just cold, but tasteless. I folded the letter and hid it in my dresser drawer. Not to keep it as a treasure, more as a reminder that even golden boy Quentin couldn't stand their toxicity. It was oddly comforting, so it wasn't about me. It wasn't about me not trying hard enough, not giving enough, not loving enough. It was about them, their inability to love with a healthy, unconditional love. In the evening, I sat on my little balcony looking out at the park below. A young mother was playing with her baby, pushing it on a swing. Every time the baby flew upward, he laughed gleefully, and the mother smiled as if that laughter was the most beautiful sound in the world. I looked at them and felt nothing. No envy, no bitterness, no anger. Just acceptance that there are different lives, different stories. My story includes parents who failed to love me, and that's something to live with. After the fight with Elaine, I didn't see any more therapists. I didn't see the point. What could they give me other than empty comfort and trite advice? Instead, I concentrated on work, on creating my new home, on building a life with no room for the ghosts of the past. But sometimes, on quiet evenings, when all of Akron is asleep and I'm still awake, haunted by insomnia, I remember Elaine's words about reacting rather than acting, that I let the past dictate my present. And at times like these, I wonder, what if she was right? What if I really am turning into the thing I hate the most? What if the voices of my parents in my head will never be silenced unless I find a way to drown them out? Not by forgiving them. No, I'll never forgive them. But maybe by acceptance? Acceptance that they were what they were, that they couldn't give me what they never had. The wound of parental rejection will never fully heal. I will always be that girl who wasn't good enough for her parents, who tried desperately to earn love, but always came up with nothing. That scar will stay with me forever, reminding me of years of pain and humiliation. But scars don't have to hurt. They can just be evidence of past battles, proof that I am a survivor. I am Margot Winsley, 33 years old, from Akron, Ohio. I am the daughter who was abandoned, a niece who was used, a department head at an insurance company, a woman who is finally living her own life. And this is just the beginning.